Many thought, and many continue to think, for good reason, that once a demagogue is in the door, in the American political system, our constitution will protect us. There's a lot to this. After all, we have the oldest and most successful constitution in the world. It's contained many powerful and ambitious presidents in the past. Think of Richard Nixon, think of Franklin Roosevelt's failed pork packing scheme that was defeated in the 1930s. But here really is our second big discovery. The Constitution by itself may not be enough to save us. Constitutions don't just work on their own. They don't work automatically. If they did, you think of a case like Argentina, which my co-author has spent a lot of time studying, which adopted essentially an identical constitution to the United States. If the only thing that matters is constitutions, Argentina would be a stable democracy. But Argentina's first democracy with this replica of the American Constitution only lasted 14 years. They experienced 6 military coups over the course of the 20th century. So what's written in the Constitution is really not enough. Instead, in our book, what we argue is that constitutions work best when they are reinforced by 2 democratic norms, or unwritten rules. And that these norms and unwritten rules that do a large part in constraining potential demagogues. So one norm is what we call mutual toleration, or accepting the legitimacy of your partisan opponents. This means that no matter how much we disagree with or dislike our rivals, they have an equal right to govern. We recognize them as loyal citizens. We don't treat our rivals as enemies. So that's the first norm. The second norm is the norm of institutional forbearance. So forbearance means the underutilization of power, the self-conscious underutilization of power, when one doesn't exercise one's legal rights. So we don't really think about this a lot in politics, this notion of forbearance, but it's absolutely vital. You think about what a president can actually do under the American Constitution. President can pardon whoever he or she likes at any point for any reason. A president with a congressional majority can pack the Supreme Court. You don't like how the Supreme Court is making decisions? Expand it to 11, expand it to 13. This is entirely legal under the Constitution. The president's agenda is stalled in Congress. He can circumvent the Congress and rule with executive orders. The Constitution doesn't prohibit this. Or think about what Congress can do. The Senate can use its right of advising consent to block every presidential Supreme Court nominee or cabinet pick that it wants. Congress, as we've just seen this last January, 2 months ago, can shut down the government over the budget and essentially lead the government to a halt. And of course, the Congress can impeach the president, basically on any grounds that it wants. So the point here is that politicians can exploit the letter of the Constitution in ways that undermine its Constitution, its spirit, which can throw democracy into crisis. So this practice is what a legal scholar, Mark Cushing, calls constitutional hardball. So the idea, again, that you can use the letter of the law to violate its spirit. If you look at any failing democracy in the world, today or in the past, you will find lots of constitutional hardball. Argentina under Perot, Spain in the 1930s, contemporary Venezuela, Turkey, Hungary. What prevents our political system from descending into deadlock, dysfunction, and this kind of authoritarianism is forbearance. It's a shared understanding among politicians that neither sides will deploy their institutional prerogatives to the hilt, that the spirit of the law will prevail over the letter of the law. So in our book, we make the case that these 2 norms of mutual toleration and forbearance are the soft guardrails of democracy. They help prevent what is normal political competition from degenerating into a kind of death spiral of political conflict that wrecks democracies throughout history. So America, of course, hasn't actually always had these soft guardrails. In the 1790s, in the early republic, partisan intolerance and constitutional hardball nearly destroyed the early American republic. In the lead up to the Civil War, certainly constitutional hardball was reigned. But beginning in the late 19th century, Democrats and Republicans largely avoided constitutional hardball. They accepted each other as legitimate and avoided destabilizing acts of constitutional hardball. There were no impeachments. There was no successful court packing. Senators were judicious in their use of filibusters and the right to the use of advice and consent. Outside of wartime, presidents largely refrained from acting unilaterally to circumvent Congress and the courts. So for more than a century, our checks and balances worked pretty well. But again, this was not because of what was written in the Constitution, but also because this was reinforced by these norms of mutual toleration and forbearance. So as we show in the book, Our democratic norms have been unraveling in the United States over the last quarter century. We saw early signs of this in the 1990s, in the Gingrich era, government shutdowns, and the partisan impeachment of Bill Clinton. But the process really accelerated in the 2000s. When Barack Obama ran for president, Republicans called him pro-terrorist, anti-American. Republican leaders like Rudy Giuliani, Newt Gingrich, Mike Huckabee, Sarah Palin said President Obama did not love America, and that Obama and the Democrats weren't real Americans. The birth of the movement even went a step further, questioning President Obama's very legitimacy as president. Now, America's always had an extremist fringe, and that was sort of my point from the beginning, it's 30%. But this wasn't fringe politics. These were national Republican leaders. This was the party's 2016 nominee for president. This means that over the last decade, in particular, leading Republicans have begun to deny the legitimacy of the Democratic rivals. They've begun to cast Democrats as the enemy. Now, this kind of decline in mutual toleration, as we've seen in other parts of the world, this decline in mutual toleration encourages politicians to abandon forbearance. When we view our partisan rivals as enemies, when we view them as an existential threat to our way of life, we become tempted to use any means necessary to stop them. And that's what's beginning to happen. Politicians are beginning to throw forbearance to the wind. The filibuster, which is really a measure of last resort from the past, has become routine practice. Politicians shut down the government and refuse to raise the debt limit. We see extraordinary acts of constitutional hardball, like the legislative coup that followed the 2016 election in North Carolina. And actually, I think a lot of the politics over gerrymandering in Pennsylvania that we've witnessed in the last year is kind of similar kind of dynamic. But I think most dramatically, the Senate's refusal to allow President Obama to fill a Supreme Court seat. This was a move that was unprecedented since the 1860s. So let me pull the different threads of the story together. The problem is not just that Americans elected a demagogue in 2016. The problem is not just that demagogue got in the door, as I put it in the beginning. The real problem is that we elected a demagogue at a time when the soft guardrails protecting our democracy have become unmoored.